Welcome to part one of a three-part series of incident response planning. My name is Warren Alford. I'm with ALS Cyber LLC. We'll be using NIST 861 as our standard for incident response. It defines the life cycle as preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, and post-incident activity. Let's begin with preparation. Incident handling is defined as a process of mitigating incidents. Your incident response plan can be used from everything from intrusions, malicious code, cyber theft, denial of service, etc. It's important to note that your incident response plan is an ancillary plan to your overall business continuity plan, and it does not take the place of your business continuity plan. Your written policies and procedures should be in place so you know what to do when an incident happens. Obviously, when an incident happens, your organization is going to be under stress, and making it up as you go is probably not the best way to resolve the incident. So having written policies, procedures, all the way down to work instructions if needed is important. Incident handling is kind of like first aid. So the caregiver is under a lot of pressure to fix things or correct things, or maybe the excitement of finding something. This could be a time when a person makes a mistake. Again, the organization is under a lot of stress. This is not the time to make it up as you go. Having a simple but well understood documented approach is very important. And also, it's important to recognize that you have to take a little bit of time to think about what needs to happen before you actually do it. Those that are well-meaning can cause some serious problems and even ruin evidence because they chose to act without going to the documented plan of action first. An incident is a violation of computer security policies, acceptable use policies, or standard computer security practices. And obviously those are going to have a negative impact on the organization. It can be everything from a targeted attack of the system to something that is not an attack, but is something that could be detrimental to the overall organization if not dealt with. So while we do think about hackers and things like that, it's not always that situation that would cause an incident. An event is any observable occurrence in a system and or network. So it could be as simple as a system boot sequence. You notice that a computer is rebooting over and over again. It could be a command and control phone home to a remote IP address. Anything like that could be an incident, and regardless, it needs to be investigated a little bit further. There are some really good handling forms that SANS has come up with, and they're free. You can go and download them. You can make them your own, specific to your company. And I encourage you to make plenty of copies. These forms are really good templates to follow during an incident. Top management is ultimately responsible for establishing the incident response plan. They're responsible for the policy, the budget, funding, and staffing. So, resourcing that plan is very important. Obviously, what's important to the executive leaders is going to get done. And if incident response is important to them, incident response will be institutionalized within the organization. Ultimately, they're responsible for this. So, this is something that has to have top-down support. It cannot be done at the lower levels of the organization because incident response, again, is an ancillary plan of the overall business continuity plan, which is owned by executive leadership. You have certain team members, and incident response is no different. The incident response team manager is one person or multiple people, including having alternates in case the manager is on vacation or what have you. These individuals are in charge of the incident response. And these individuals should be technically competent and have excellent communication skills when speaking with a wide range of audiences. These individuals may be speaking to executive leadership, the CEO, the CFO, all of those in the C-suite, and then next, speaking to an analyst in IT. So they have to really be able to communicate and change their scope from very, very technical to very, very broad. The incident response team manager acts as a liaison with all levels of the organization, and they're ultimately responsible for ensuring that the response activities are performed properly. You should have one or more trained people to fill this. Again, having one person is a single point of failure, so you should have a backup. What happens if this incident takes place when your IR team manager is out sick or on vacation? You should consider relevant factors when putting together your team. You should select people with the appropriate skills and training for incident response. You should identify other groups within the organization that may need to participate in the incident handling. And this is very important when putting together the incident response plan. When planning, this should be a cross-functional activity because until you bring other people from the organization and other departments together, you don't really know what you're missing. For instance, legal will have a role to play. Customer service will have a role to play. Perhaps the incident involves data leakage, and so now customers need to be notified of that. Operations should be involved, and ultimately operations should be the tactical owners of this plan across the board, while executive leadership is involved in ultimately being responsible and accountable for sourcing and funding the plan. You should also determine the necessary services the team should be able to offer. Members of your team should have excellent technical skills. Obviously, depending upon the incident, you will have IT, you may have the help desk as a subset of IT, you may have your cybersecurity team involved, You may have just end users who are involved. Obviously, social engineering is a very big part of data breaches and phishing and things like that. And in some cases, these individuals are the ones that fall prey to social engineering. So, a good solid training program and incident response, and obviously cybersecurity itself, is going to return a lot of benefit for your organization. You should also give team members the opportunity to perform other tasks. This is really a great way to build a capability for your incident response team. Let people try different things during testing, not necessarily during a real incident. And this brings into focus the idea that incident testing of the plan is going to be really important, not only so people get used to the incident happening and identifying the incident and being able to follow the plan, but it's also a really great educational device to be able to see what went right, what did not go so well, and what do we need to do to improve the capability of the people, or what do we need to change in the plan itself. Creating a mentoring program is a wonderful way to start building those capabilities. So perhaps you have someone on the help desk that is part of your incident response team. While they have a clear set of roles and objectives and things that they need to do during the incident response, having them cross-train, maybe in the cybersecurity group, will certainly help, and it will increase not only the capabilities of that individual, but in sharing this information across the individual team members, it will help them to better understand what other people will be doing during the incident, and that will help them to make better informed decisions for what they need to be doing as they're working through the plan. You should also audit the incident response policies and procedures to make sure that they're effectively rolled out. And also, this will help facilitate lessons learned and make things a little easier when it comes to overall improvement. Every team member should have good problem solving skills and critical thinking abilities. Again, this is a really good way to build the capability through testing. While you don't want someone going off script, you know, uh, leaving the plan and making it up as they go, you do want them to have a little bit of flexibility in the plan to think about what they're seeing. Because if they haven't properly identified what the incident is, then they cannot properly triage or determine what plan of action should be followed. War games is a really great way to test the plan. It's not the only way, but it does provide some, I guess, real world experience. If you were to ask your systems administrator to act as a disgruntled employee and ask them what would they do to hurt the system or to cause an incident, this is a really good way to be able to understand how your insider threats might develop, and it will allow you to build threat models around those particular threats. Incident response team will be communicating inside and outside of the organization, and again, it's very important to bring in all of the areas of your organization. If your organization is a cross-functional matrix organization, obviously there may be some silos there that are not intentional but just happen to develop. So breaking those silos down or allowing your incident response team to work across those silos and bring people from different departments together will help make your plan more robust. And again, sometimes you may not think that HR or public affairs or your security department would be a player in the incident response plan, but when you bring them together, they will start to bring what if scenarios, and they will start telling you what they need to do or what they think they need to do during an actual incident. And that is great for synergies and for planning and fleshing out a well-developed incident response plan. You should have a central incident response team. This is a team that handles the incidents throughout the organization. This model is really the most effective for small organizations or organizations that are not spread out, so they may have one location geographically. And so having one team is probably the best approach for that. If you have a larger organization that maybe has multiple locations, you may want to use the distributed incident response team model. You may have an incident response team that is a central team, maybe at your headquarters, but then you may have other teams that are located at your different geographical locations. And so this will allow the headquarters location to be able to collect information on how an incident is progressing and feed that information up to the C-suite to keep them apprised of what's happening. But if the incident happened at a certain location outside of your headquarters location, those individuals should be able to handle that, but they will still have the ability to bring in the HQ centralized team if they need that team in resolving the incident. Some organizations use a partially outsourced team model. The organization may contract with someone. It could be a security company. It could be a company that maybe helps provide them with part of their services, like cloud services or what have you. So there are different arrangements, and some of these arrangements can be very, very detailed, and some can be very, very simple, depending on the organization, the locations, really what the scope of the incident response plan is trying to accomplish. The most popular of this outsourced is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week monitoring. And this is done through MSSPs, Managed Security Service Providers, and or just MSPs, Managed Service Provider. And this is probably for, again, a small organization that outsources their services like this is probably a good approach for them to use. The MSP or the MSSP has the technical background and the access to the actual services, so they can quickly go into maybe the SIEM and take a look and see what's happening, or take a look at the endpoints. And then there is a fully outsourced, and again, depending on what type model best suits your particular company, this is something that some companies will do. It's most likely to be used when the organization needs a full-time on-site incident response team but doesn't have available or qualified employees to do so. One thing to note that a fully outsourced solution is probably going to be more expensive because you're going to have your own employees involved, but then having contractors on site all the time as part of your capability may be very expensive. So again, you have to really look at your cost benefit analysis. And ultimately, this should all begin with a business impact analysis, which is going to be part of your business continuity planning. And remember, your incident response is just a sub-plan of business continuity. You should prepare the plan. Again, it should be a formal, focused, and coordinated approach. The incident response program structure should also be discussed within the plan. So the plan has to be detailed enough to allow the people that participate in the plan to follow it. But it should have the flexibility to allow the incident response team members to think and evaluate certain situations. In other words, you can't plan for every situation. Your incident response plan will not lead you through every incident that could possibly happen. So there has to be enough flexibility for the incident response plan to, based upon their qualifications and experience and capabilities, to make certain determinations about what the incident actually is. The plan should include your mission and strategies and goals, and these should be determined by your executive leadership. It should have top management approval. Again, incident response, like any other initiative, must begin at the very top. And if it does not have top-down support, it will not be successful. There are many things that top management provides, ultimately beginning with the policy and then funding, resources, etc. And without those things, your incident response plan will not be successful. It should be an overall organizational approach to incident response. It should take in account your locations, the things that you need to protect in those locations, the data and information and the way that it flows, also physical access to your location. So there are a lot of different pieces to this, and this is again a very good reason why you should bring in the cross-functional organizational structure and bring those people in from those different areas to help you determine what's important. You should have metrics to measure your incident response capability and effectiveness. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And obviously, having metrics is going to be very important. Not only SLAs, service level agreements, but also metrics and measures like, for instance, how much data are you willing to lose before you stop an incident? Or how long can the system be down before something has to happen? So all of these different metrics will figure into showing the capability and the effectiveness of the plan. You should also have a roadmap for maturing your overall capability. And this is usually done through lessons learned. So whether it is a real incident or a test of your incident response plan, there should be a separate lessons learned meeting where you bring together people from all over the organization who took part in the incident and try to gather those lessons learned. What did we do that was good? What did we do that was not so good? How do we need to change the plan? Do we need to update it? And what do we need to do to increase our capability of our human resources that are working the incident? Information sharing with public affairs in the legal department, outside parties, including law enforcement, should be evaluated and should be part of your plan as needed. Your risk assessments are really the trigger, and they're the best way to determine what risks are posed during an incident. Understanding the applicable threats, including your specific threats to your organization, is very important. Each risk should be prioritized, and the risks should be mitigated, transferred, or accepted until a reasonable overall level of risk is reached. Now, how would you transfer risk? Well, you've probably seen in the other videos, transferring risk is something that you would do through insurance or what have you. Just note that you want to look specifically at, like, for instance, your cybersecurity insurance policy, because companies that insure other companies are getting very strict about what needs to be done by the company they are insuring. It used to be that people would get insurance and then they would not do anything. They would not come up with an incident response plan. They would not have a business continuity plan. They would not test the plan. They would not do their due diligence for their suppliers. And the insurance companies have really taken a beating for that. And now they are starting to put that responsibility and accountability back on the company they are insuring to make sure they have done their due diligence and are not just buying insurance to say, we have insurance, we don't have to do anything to prepare. You should also have user awareness and training. This is very, very important, not only for those that take active parts in the incident, but for others throughout the organization. How should a person report an incident or what they think might be an incident? This is very important for them to know. These are people that may not be part of your incident response team, but they need to know how to report those things. There are some reasons that you would want to notify law enforcement. First of all, if it's a threat to public health or safety, substantial impact to third parties, is it a legal requirement in your industry to notify law enforcement? What if personally identifiable information or personal health information is breached? What ways could you benefit from having criminal discovery during this process? And then obviously, if it is your corporate policy to notify law enforcement, you have no option but to do so. Understand that when you notify law enforcement, they are going to have different objectives from you. Your company objective during an incident is to identify, contain, remediate that incident, and get the company back to an operating basis, whatever the incident may be. And law enforcement's objective is to build a case for prosecution. It's not necessarily the things to get you back to normal. So sometimes those objectives diverge. Also, keep in mind that law enforcement can seize equipment like servers and things like that as part of their investigation, and this may cause some business interruption through seizure of property and court orders and things like that. Incident response teams should have what is sometimes called jump bags or ready to go bags. These are bags that the incident response team can grab, and it should have everything they need or everything they think they may need for an incident. And the only way to really know for sure is starting with brainstorming what needs to be included in the ready to go bag. But then testing is going to validate that based on the particular threat models that you've developed. Those materials should be included in the bag. However, in testing, if the person initiating the test comes up with a different scenario that you may not have thought of, that may cause you to have to go back and add some things to your bag. It should always be stocked, easily identifiable. It should be water resistant. You should have encryption keys, fresh media, blank CDs, USBs, high capacity hard drives. You should also have forensic or diagnosis type software that you trust and that you know how to use. Your team should use these things and be very familiar with them. SANS offers an investigative forensic tool called SIFT, which is free to download on their website. It's a Linux-based image, and it should be something that your team has and is used to using. Google GRR is another that is good to have. We recommend also a bootable Linux environment. Obviously, Linux is a real good tool to have, especially when doing forensics. A lot of good tools can be used with Linux to investigate and to do some recovery type activities, forensic activities, etc. You should also have a USB token device that is a minimum of 16 gig. Now this is probably going to be dated information in a year or even 6 months as quickly as things evolve. But the takeaway here is that you should have something that has the memory and the capability and the storage that is right for you. If you have a huge amount of data and information and huge backups and things like that, you're going to need to adjust. 2 terabyte external hard drive. This may be dated in 6 months or a year from now, as memory and things like that are less expensive. And obviously, with cloud environments and things like that, you really want to make sure this is specific to your organization. You should have a switch, maybe a couple of switches, some patch cables, USB cables, connectors, small jumpers, and things like that that you may need. A laptop with multiple operating systems, a dual boot, or a Linux on metal installation is good. It should have a large hard drive and a lot of RAM. You should have a call list like a phone book. And it's important to note that some of these things should not be just digital. Having a hard copy of these things is going to be important, especially if your overall environment has been hit with ransomware and you cannot access your incident response plan. You cannot access a phone book or Active Directory or all these things that you rely on in normal operations. They may not be there during an incident. You should also have a cell phone with extra charged batteries, flashlights, and things like that. Anti-static plastic baggies for storing information. You should also have chain of custody forms. Um, these are very important for prosecution in the future. You really need to talk with your legal department, but you can also reach out to local law enforcement like FBI field offices, and they can talk you through what you would need to securely keep the chain of custody. You should have desiccants, which are good for moisture, keeping out moisture. Notebooks, extra pens, incident response forms, make sure you have plenty of copies, and make sure they're the current version as well. If you revise all of your forms in digital and you forget to put hard copies of those, then you're not going to have the latest and greatest. The same thing for your incident response plan. Having hard copies with the incident response team is going to be very important. You may not be able to get to the quote official copy on your share drive or your SharePoint or what have you. So having hard copies and having the latest version is going to be important. Having flashlights with extra batteries, having tools like screwdrivers with multi-head, tweezers, corner mirrors, telescoping hands for grabbing objects and things like that is going to be helpful for you as well. Also, pre-approval for a certain dollar amount for miscellaneous items. So having a credit card or something that has been given pre-authorization by executive leadership up to a certain amount of money will help your incident response team, especially if they're out in the field at a remote location and they have to go and purchase something to help them. They do not have the specific thing and they need to go to the store and get these things, including food, lodging, and things like that that may be needed as well for the team. And then lastly, deodorant, aspirin, antacids, all of these things for the human element. Your teams may be working something like this for 48 straight hours. And so think about what you would need for that entire period of time. The bag should be easily identifiable. Having walkie-talkies, sometimes 3 or 4 Motorola or other brand handheld radios is important. Keep in mind your PBX or your voice over IP system may be part of the incident. Having an additional MP3 audio recorder in your to-go bag is good to have. You'll also need a war room, and I want to stress this is not a cubicle. This is a place where your incident response team should be able to go away from everyone and everyone should not have access to this particular area. This is where they will be brainstorming some of the corrective actions that need to be taken. And so they don't need to worry about people overhearing or people wandering into the room and seeing what's on their dry erase board. Um, the door should be lockable and it should have some type of access control. Um, Maybe having a filing cabinet for storage of the artifacts, hard drives, tapes, documents, what have you, that are being collected would be important as well. There should be some kind of projector or TV that they can plug into and project what they're looking at so the whole team can take a look at this. Again, it's going to depend on what the incident is as to what those capabilities are. There should be ample dry erase boards, post-it notes, and things like that. Maybe a portable printer and a camera with backup power source that again is separate from the network. It's in the to-go bag, and portable printers and things like that are not very expensive, but they can really make a difference for that quick print job that you need to do to hand to a team member who is maybe going to be in a SOC or in a data center or in another part of the organization, and they don't have access to digital assets. Having current topology charts, network diagrams, things like that that are up to date, that will really be of value. Again, consider your system having ransomware or being wiped. You may not have access to those tools to be able to generate a network diagram or a data flow diagram. You should have current baselines as well. You should know what those baselines are and what they were. This will be important as you're starting to put the system back together. Having port list, critical assets, cryptographic hashes of critical files, things like that would be important as well. Some of the issues that you may have is the competence with team tools. Again, if you do not practice with these tools and you're expected to pop open a command line in Linux, and you haven't used the command line in 6 months, that's going to create some issues for your team. Creating a forensic image. Nothing is worse than when you're trying to save an image and you pop open a command line and you've forgotten how to do that. Or you don't do it correctly and you end up overwriting the image. I mean, all of these may sound comical, but they have happened. So you want to pay attention to that. Having someone with good keyboard skills and up-to-date skills with command line is very important. Also having a capability of reviewing logs and analyzing logs. If you're trying to find what happened in your system and you're reviewing a spreadsheet that has 47,000 entries on it, it's probably not going to be the best way for you to analyze the logs. You need to have a capability on your team that uses some kind of automation in being able to separate, using the Pareto principle, separate the important from the trivial. Also, having someone that is up to date on the network and how to analyze the network, being very familiar with what current state looked like is going to be important. And then also teams will face paralysis of analysis. There is sometimes so much data and information that they just do not know where to start. This again is another reason for testing your plan, and not only testing and talking through a tabletop exercise, but actually having the people bring up the tools and analyze something to be able to arrive at a conclusion. It cannot be stressed enough. In some cases, not being familiar with the incident response process through disuse, again, another great reason for testing. Probably the most effective way to do true testing, besides having a tabletop talk through, is having red team, blue team exercises, where your red team would act as an attacker or would do something in the system that would present a threat, or they try to exploit that threat. And your blue team would be the defenders and part of your incident response team that would identify, contain, and eradicate that. But something to point out is during testing, red team and blue team being at odds with each other is good. Good competition and, upping the game, so to speak, bringing the A game is good. But it's also important to note that your red team can be valuable to you during a real attack. So look at your cybersecurity assurance team that performs red team events during testing and perhaps have them part of your incident response team. Another set of eyes from people that are trained and qualified can only help your organization. Detection and analysis will be our next video that we're going to look at. If your company is looking for an incident response plan or needing to improve their capabilities, reach out to ALS Cyber. We'll be happy to help.